Hello and welcome to It's All Kicking Off, another football discussion podcast with myself, Adam Wilbourn, Adam Clery and Andy Murray to discuss a burning football issue. And gents, we are gathered here today to discuss, is this Tottenham's year?
No.
Well, there you have it. Let us know your thoughts in the... Actually, we probably need to stretch this out a little bit longer, don't we?
So we absolutely settled on it's all kicking off.
At the moment.
Right, okay, good, yep.
For now.
Fine. Suggestions in the comments, please, for the round table.
We're still working on 4-4 news.
4-4 news.
4-4 news is top. It's top.
No, but we are here today to talk about Tottenham Hotspur, of course. Champions League finalist, fourth place in the Premier League last season. And I want to ask you, more importantly than is this their year, because it clearly isn't their year, let's just say, to be Premier League champions. Smash cut to May next year. Is this their most important season ever, considering what happened last season?
Well, I do think they need to take a big step forward from being the third best team in England. The problem is, I think that the policy that has brought them to this point has maybe taken them as far as they can. The whole, let's not buy superstars, let's have a core of really, really excellent players that aren't quite on a world-class level, Harry Kane aside perhaps, and Eriksen on his best days. Let's develop from within, let's supplement that with the odd smart buy here and there, developing players that Pochettino can nourish, without breaking the bank, without splashing mental fees every summer. It's got them really far. Pochettino has done a wonderful job. I think pound for pound, maybe the best manager in England over the past few seasons with what he's had to work with and the results he's gotten with those resources. But I do believe it's reached its ceiling. I think that if they want to progress to a level closer to Liverpool and Manchester City, that they really do have to find a way to break that mold, break that policy a little bit without becoming one of these clubs that spends the GDP of a small island nation every single summer and wrecks what they've established. That's going to be a really hard balance to strike, but that's up to the management team that's a problem for them to solve.
It's a hard transition for them to have, isn't it?
I'm going to play devil's advocate slightly here, because if you think about, as cynical as this is, if you think about Tottenham as a business, as an organisation, as well as just a footballing entity, I think they would look at the last few years and the fact that there's no trophy as a huge successful period for them. Like, they've established themselves as one of the best teams in the country, whereas Tottenham traditionally were always up and down all over the place. I don't think they've been outside the top 6 since 2010.
Forever,
I want to say, so we're coming up a decade now of consistently being at one of the top teams in the league. I don't think they've been out the Champions League places for a good number of years as well. And obviously the trophy's what fans want. The trophy's what you tend to define eras in football clubs by. But if you look, as you say, they've not thrown around ludicrous sums of money. They've moved to a state-of-the-art new stadium. They've established themselves as a global brand. They're now one of the biggest, most well-supported English clubs throughout the entire world. They've kept their best players. They've attracted new players. They've had no real disaster stories in the transfer market. Like, Pochettino even got something out of Sissoko last year, who for a while was considered an absolute huge flop. I think it's dangerous to sort of go, well, not dangerous, but you know what I mean, stupid to go around saying like, oh, Tottenham haven't achieved anything, they've not done anything.
Yeah, it's nonsense.
They didn't win the league that year, they've not had a good FA Cup run, typical, they got beat in the Champions League final. I think the club will look at the last few years as the most successful period for forever and ever, certainly in the modern era of football. But of course, if you're sitting at home and you're a Tottenham fan and you're getting bored of like second, third, fourth, and then getting to cup finals and losing and not having anything to show for it, I can understand that completely from a fan's perspective, but if you think about the bigger picture with all this, it is their most important season ever, yes, but in so much as their last season was their most important season ever, and the season before that was their most important season ever. It's going to be a balancing act, because they don't ever look to me like they were steady. Like they're a dynasty, you know what I mean? Like you could strip. If Guardiola left Man City, you'd believe they could get in the kind of person that could keep that level of dominance. I think Klopp's nearly got Liverpool to that level, where if he walked, you'd still think they would be challenging for that kind of thing. Chelsea, for a number of years, were getting absolutely anybody in to manage, and they were still, one season away from being potential league winners. I think for Tottenham, it's precarious. I think they lose one or two players. I think they lose that manager. I think they could be, scrapping for sixth. I think it could very easily drop down to where your Evertons, your West Hams, possibly even your Leicesters are. I think they're one season away from catastrophe at any given point. Thus, this season is always going to be the most important season. But at the same time, again, I think their time in the sun of, finishing at the very top ends of the league and enjoying long runs in the Champions League sort of means they can get away with having a couple of years dropping down if they sort of feel they need to.
It's weird. If you'd offered a Spurs fan a Champions League final spot and fourth place in the Premier League at the start of last season, they'd snatched your hand off for that.
Yeah.
One of the catalysts for us talking about this is, of course, the news that Kieran Trippier is off to Atletico Madrid for £20 million.
20 million, yeah.
Thoughts on that?
Bargain, isn't it, in this market?
It is and it isn't.
Yeah.
English player, relatively, well, quite youngish. Not old. Very effective on his day. Wonderful World Cup.
And that free kick he scored.
No, I don't remember that at all. Very, very poor last season. Not a good season for him at all. I've lived with 2 Tottenham Hotspur fans in the period between the World Cup and this, and they both absolutely hate Kieran Trippier as a result of last season. Very ineffective. When I put this is anecdotal, of course.
Yeah, we wouldn't want to put these 2 Tottenham fans, obviously do not represent the group.
You never know.
All Tottenham fans, but they might.
But when I watched him last season as well, the crossing wasn't there, the confidence wasn't there. He really hemorrhaged possession like few other players in the league and cost them a lot of goals as well, particularly in that back end of the season there. So while you might look at if this was World Cup Kieran Trippier, where he was one of the best players in the whole tournament.
I remember that free kick he scored.
Yes, I do.
When England finished 4th. Then, I think that 20 million would be a ridiculously low fee. But on the back of last season, perhaps not so much. However, from Tottenham's standpoint, they're going to have to spend more than 20 to replace him, right? Unless they think Serge Aurier or Kyle Walker-Peters can step up and perform at Trippier's level, which on the basis of last season might not actually be that difficult.
Aurier I love Serge Aurier just because he's an absolute liability, isn't he? He looks like he could just as easily like run past 6 people as he could get himself sent off fighting with a crowd. Like I love players like that. The Trippier one's a strange one because obviously we're used to these grossly inflated prices for English players, but that tends to be when they're moving to an English club because, of course, you've got that Champions League quota that a lot of places need filled. You've got that homegrown UK quota that a lot of places need filled. So there is obviously a premium on that. Obviously not a problem for Atletico Madrid. They can sign as many English players as they want. There's no thing for it. But I think in the current market where we're talking about Maguire going for 80 million, De Ligt going for 70 million, I think for a proven international player who, let's face it, has had one bad season in a run of a few very, very good ones.
Oh, yeah.
You would expect Premier League clubs to be dipping into 20 million to buy a fullback from the Championship this year if their reputation's good enough.
Yeah, I think if he does go for 20 million, I don't know if that's been confirmed yet, that speaks volumes about how Tottenham see that player because Daniel Levy, of course, is one of the hardest bargainers. Yeah, he's like Porto's boards. He's ridiculous. He'll grind every last drop of money he thinks he can out of a deal incoming and outgoing. So I think it says a lot about Tottenham's valuation of the player if that's what they think of him.
I think he's only got a year left on his contract, hasn't he? I could be mistaken.
That's going to play into
it. Does always play into it. But again, 20 million for... he still gets in the England side. He still gets in the Tottenham side. He's playing Champions League football. It does seem... we're talking about... Is it Tyrone Mings going for 24 million to Villa?
What if Kieran Trippier is just an absolute fanny and no one likes him?
What if?
That might be it.
What if he's the new Neymar?
Yeah, could be.
He's going to have some banter with Simeone instead at Atletico.
That'll go well.
Of course, Tottenham have signed, I'm going to attempt this and probably murder the name pronunciation of his surname, and Ndombele, I'm going to go with.
I think it's Ndombele.
Let's go with Ndombele.
People who play more FIFA than me will tell me precisely how it's pronounced, but I think it's Ndombele.
60 million euros from Lyon. An exciting investment for that club.
Harden up that midfield a little bit. There's a lot of soft little boys in that central Tottenham midfield.
I've heard from a very good source that this year is Harry Winks' year.
But Harry Winks is also the softest little boy in the Premier League.
Harry Winks and Oliver Skipp. They're I like both players. I think they're very polished. They've got that Tottenham sheen on them. But they could neither of them. If they were in a bar fight, neither of them could throw an LB supper. You know what I mean?
It's very rare that I see elite level athletes. So I think I could maybe chin if I got the jump on them.
I reckon I could batter both of them. Probably at the same time.
Pretty much half a Tottenham squad at the minute.
Yeah. You need a hammer thrower in there, don't you?
Half of them would be thrown due to the fact they'd say, why is Christian Eriksen attacking?
Whoa! That's probably genius, that. Yeah. Come on, guys, put a Danish accent on. We'll get them and bangs in the back of the heat.
Yeah. Where else do you think Tottenham need to strengthen that squad? Because they've got we talk about the spine of a team, and they have granted the player who made the biggest mistake in a World Cup final ever that no one actually remembers in Hugo Lloris. They've got They've got Eriksen, as you mentioned. They've got Son. They've got Kane. They've got Moura. They've got Vertonghen. Yeah, exactly.
It's a very, very good squad. I think the depth is a real issue for them, though. Like last season, they had bad injury problems. The season almost became completely derailed. Obviously, it wasn't derailed in the end. They finished third and they were in the Champions League final. That, by all accounts, is a very good season. However, when your Kanes and so forth are injured, you got Fernando Llorente coming in, and he's 34 and just kind of a big beanpole. Was an effective player at one point in his career, but
scored with his hip against Man City.
Yes, indeed. And like even players for like Lucas Moura, a very talented guy, but very streaky, very, very streaky. Started the season hot, went off the boil, came back and forth. Obviously, very important in the Champions League. I don't know if players of that ilk can really be relied on if you want to take a step forward.
Yeah, I agree.
Perhaps more accustomed to a bench role or what's the word I'm looking for? Rotation. That's the one. That's the one. So maybe you need one more attacking player to complement Harry Kane, Christian Eriksen, and Son. Gareth Bale would be an excellent addition if he's not broken. But beside that, I think it's a question of depth.
I think Dele Alli's a bit of a problem for them because obviously when he was 19, 20, he came through and he looked like being genuinely one of the most exciting young players in the entire world. Like his contributions were great, the goals he scored, the assists he was getting, positions he'd take up, his inventiveness, his creativity, everything. Attitude, I still think is a bit of an issue with him. He's a horrid little...
He's a whapper, isn't he?
But the last 2 seasons, I think he's really struggled with the sort of the pressure and the amount of games they put on him. I think last season was just like... He scored very, very few goals for them. But again, people forget, I think he's 22, 23. Like, he's still at a developing stage in his career. And I think if they had an alternative number 10, because I know they like to play Eriksen sort of all around the place, and there's still talk that he might be off this summer. But somebody, a more senior figure who could sort of play across that 3 in midfield. I don't know how comfortable Bale is on the right or in the centre. Presume he'd be all right there with his ability. But I think there's a lot been put on the shoulders of players who, let's not forget, are still very, like Kane's still quite young. And we saw last season, I think he dropped down to something like 25 goals when he'd been getting high 30s and 40s for 2 or 3 seasons. And they couldn't really replace that. Like Son got a couple of really important singular goals to like nick a draw here, nick a win there, but all of a sudden the comfortable factor was going. They didn't have a striker who was going to put games out of sight for them. You could see every game when Kane was there. They were still getting the results, fair play to them, but they were stretching to get them. They were straining to get them. Your Burnleys and your whoever's were taking them to the limit in some of these games.
I wonder if perhaps maybe they could use more of a penalty box striker as well. Harry Kane can certainly be deployed in that regard, but one of his greatest strengths, particularly over the past few seasons, has been dropping extremely deep, almost to like a peripheral midfield role, recycling play and then moving forward and participating in that phase of play as well. Perhaps a different option to come off the bench and play with Kane rather than replace him. You don't want Javier Hernandez playing up front on his own for Tottenham Hotspur, but maybe that would help them push forward a little bit, give them a different dynamic up front and confuse defenses a little bit more.
I mean, Llorente was hardly... I think the sort of thought he was like, he can do Kane's job in certain regards.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, the guy did score some important goals for them, but he's not somebody who... I mean, they didn't turn to him when Kane was injured, did they?
No, I've got mixed emotions about Llorente because I've seen all the evidence.
Very sexy.
I was having a hard moment
sexy
there because I forgot who he was, like Soldado. No. I was going through every tall Spanish striker that couldn't unseat David Villa for 15 years.
Yeah.
No, it's not Soldado. It's not the other one. It's not the other one. It's Llorente. That's it. Fernando
Llorente is one of those players, and I'm sure we all have one, who you refuse to accept criticism of because he was a legend for you on a computer game. Yeah. Him at FIFA, when I had him a few years ago, was an absolute machine. So I'm like, he's got it in his locker. He just needs the right manager to get it out of him.
Balotelli for me.
Yeah.
I replaced Andy Carroll with him on a game on a FIFA career mode years and years and years ago.
Andy, any legends that pop out for you?
To Madeira from Championship Manager. Not even a real player.
We're going in the deep cuts
Not
now.
Even a real player.
Remember when Freddie Guarin went to Porto and I was like, just you watch, boys. Just you watch.
Mark Very certain Freddie Adu still available for Tottenham if they want to try and sign him this
window. He is
window.
Actually. I read about him.
Is he selling Hoovers or something?
No, he's in MLS, but he's in MLS
is he back?
again this
Okay.
year. I read something about him, like this is like his last throw of the dice or something.
Okay. Now, to get back
off topic,
to get back to Gareth Bale, obviously there's been a lot of speculation
Very much
about
the
him.
Freddie Adu of his day.
Indeed. There's obviously the big issue is money when it comes to all this because they have to smash their wage structure to bring him in. Is that worth it? And if it's not worth it, do you think there's any way that they can resolve that to bring him home?
I think that if Tottenham Hotspur are confident that Gareth Bale is still Gareth Bale and that the events of the previous season haven't ground him down a little bit as a player, I know that sounds ridiculous as he's only 30, but his numbers were way down last season and obviously had a lot of issues on and off the field. If they still think that he can be something close to the peak version of himself, then to me, smashing that wage structure, while it sets a dangerous precedent, is kind of a no-brainer. He is on his day one of the best players in the world. Tottenham, the only player you can say that about in their squad at the moment is Harry Kane, and even then last season Harry Kane had his injury problems, and he's going to miss games potentially going forward as well. Gareth Bale might as well, but having that other option I think would be very useful for them. Daniel Levy obviously knows a lot more about this kind of stuff than us, but might not be the worst idea.
I think he's a better fit for a club like Chelsea at the minute, Gareth Bale, because I think it is too much of a step in the wrong direction for them to sort of like throw this policy they've had out the window purely because this player has an affinity with the club. If you take the romanticism out of it, the fact he's played for them before, look at what they are actually buying in the here and now. It's not a Tottenham transfer in any way, shape, or form. Like the guy is 30. As you say, his numbers are down. He might very well be an exceptional transfer for them, but it's a risk. And it's a risk for somebody you're not going to get any. There's hardly going to be any sell-on value for him at that age, especially if it doesn't work out for him, it's not going to work out at all. Whereas, again, you could see a Chelsea or even a Man United to a lesser extent swallowing that kind of absurd outlay, sort of they did for Sanchez and whatnot.
There's a harmony issue there as well, because if Harry Kane sits there and in comes Gareth Bale on 350k a week and all these other players are earning, half that? Yeah. Let's be speculative. They're going to get a little bit upset themselves and maybe start looking elsewhere, and it does risk poisoning the well.
If you look at the work those players have done, because they've not really invested in that squad for 3 or 4 seasons now, it's been very much this Alderweireld, Vertonghen, Lloris, Eriksen, Kane, sort of Ali, sort of like core that they've had for good 3 or 4 seasons now. They've dragged Spurs into the most comfortable league and cup competitions, the most comfortable they've been, the most successful they've been in these for a long, long time. They've done it, on a fraction of the wages that their peers are getting paid. If you look at like what Spurs players make compared to like your Chelsea's, Man United, your Man City's, your Arsenal's, your Liverpool's even.
That was a Danny Rose interview, wasn't there?
Yeah,
last season.
But they're happy to do it because they clearly buy into this. They clearly like doing all of this. And they've said, oh, by the way, remember that player who left to go and do bigger things than all of this? The player who didn't want to be part of this project effectively. He wanted to go chase his dream elsewhere. Well, we're going to get him back. For probably what we're paying you all combined. I hope that's okay. He might not play all the time, though, because he's getting on a bit now and he's got his injury problems. So he might not play all the time. But when he does, can you just, give him the ball?
Yeah.
I think it would be... The thing is, if Gareth Bale's that bothered about going to Tottenham, he should respect what the wage structure is there and either say that he wants the other players to be paid in line with what he's going to get, or that he's quite happy to go down to that sort of level. It's not that he's going to be short of a bob or two, is it?
The reason why I asked that question is, of course...
Also give soldiers footballers' wages.
The reason why I asked that question is there's always speculation surrounding Mauricio Pochettino. As you said, he's done wonderful things at Tottenham, but there's always that question mark hanging over of, or if a bigger club who said, yeah, you can just do this, but with unlimited funds comes along... Yeah. Is he going to be tempted away? And that was a consistent thing last season. Obviously, he dragged Tottenham to the Champions League final. Whether he can recreate that form, and obviously the stuff we've seen in the league in recent years is another question. But could his head be turned? And what does the future hold for Mauricio Pochettino?
Yeah, I think last season was very telling with Pochettino. There was a point, I believe it was around about Christmas, where it seemed like he was coming out with something very frustrated and very annoyed every other week in the media. And it almost seemed like he was trying to talk himself into getting sacked. Now, that's obviously not what he was doing, but he seemed very uncomfortable in his
position. The Man United job's knocking around.
Exactly. And, perhaps he had his eye on that and thought, well, hold on a minute, they're throwing this and that around and putting themselves in these positions, even though he ended up outperforming Man United at the end.
I was going to say, why would he want to step down? That's not me being facetious. The way Man United runs the club is inferior to Spurs. Their league positions and recent history are inferior to Spurs. There's only 1 or 2 jobs in the world that would be a step up.
But you'd be looking at the potential of the Man United job and the size of the club. They're still them or Real Madrid, the biggest club in the world, and they are going to throw money around. So if he's going to move on and finances are an issue to him, then that would be a deciding factor. That being said, while there will come a day when Pochettino does do that, he's not going to stay at Spurs until he retires. unless he decides, like, in 5 years, I've got enough money, I'm off. There will come a day when he eventually wants to go and have this sandbox where he can throw hundreds of millions around every single thing. But at the same time, I think he really relishes the challenge. I think that mindset he showed when the Man United job was available kind of eased off a little bit when they started making serious headway in the Champions League, and they were consistently outperforming United in the league. And I think he's got another couple of years left in him at the very least. I think he gains great satisfaction from what he's been able to do with this group of players and the way he's been able to bring them along. And I don't see him bouncing for a while.
I agree with Andy completely. I think he's in a good position there. He's taking Spurs to... I think if he probably looked at where Spurs were when he took the job, he probably had an eye on using that to get one of the big elite jobs in football. But if you look at where he's taken Spurs to, most of those jobs that would have looked appealing at the time are probably quite inferior to it now. It would be a sideways move to go to Chelsea now. It would be a backward step to go to Man United. And I think, as Andy says, you're literally looking at a Real Madrid kind of position, and that's it, really. I don't really see... Like, I know Spurs finished third, fourth, and we always like to make a joke in this country that whatever the joke in football is, the punchline is somehow Tottenham Hotspur. But realistically, unless he goes to a Madrid, it's not a step up in his career.
Final question. What did Spurs need to do differently next season?
Wow.
Aside from win the league, win the Champions League, etc.
I can't really answer that without contradicting myself at the start of this video, because I'd love to say, just win a cup, go on a cup run, get the FA Cup, get that monkey off your back that you've not won a trophy, have something to show for the last few years, blah, 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 blah. Get that, then it's just, people forget about it as soon as you win it. But nothing, really. Just, if they stay where they are, they get another fourth place finish, get away in the cups, keep everybody together, keep the core of the squad together, players they've been playing. You know, that's all they need to do. But again, just don't mess it up, I think, is what they need to do this season. Don't fall off. Don't start getting a load of injuries in, or having players get their heads turned, or letting the wrong players leave, or bring in the wrong players, and before they know it, they're looking around, they're in 6th, they're in 7th.
Yeah, keep the core players. If they lose a Kane or an Eriksen, I think it's a disaster for them, particularly if they're not going to be inclined to replace them. Keep the core players, complement them with a few squad additions. Ndombele's going to go straight into the team. He's probably better than Victor Wanyama.
Only the player Scott Brown could have been.
Well, they did miss out on Graham Shinney earlier this window. Big loss to them. Chiniesta stand free. But it's a personnel issue to me. Pochettino could probably do without melting down in the media again this year. That probably didn't do his squad the world of good when this talismanic leader, this father figure, this guy who has brought you on as a footballer and developed you is getting so pissed off and frustrated in the press. He could be a little bit more professional in that regard. But as a whole, there's not really much that needs to be done. The business model's fantastic. Squad's great. The harmony's very high. Let's keep pushing.
Let us know your thoughts in the comment section. Is this Tottenham's most important season ever? And don't forget, you can tweet them at us as well, at WhatCultureFC. Watch there. You can follow all three of us. You can follow Adam Clery at
Adam Clery, Clery.
You can follow Andy Murray at
Andy H. Murray. The H stands for
Hotspur.
You can follow me at Adam Wilbourn. I said you can follow us all at WhatCultureFC, and make sure you subscribe to What Culture Football on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from, for daily football podcasts. My thanks to Adam and to Andy. Thank you for watching or listening, and we will see you soon.